What's up, everybody? My name is Britt. I'm the assistant director at Creative Student. We are a new art center that opened in Prince George's County in February, and then March happened, and now we're here. It's been an excellent opportunity. We've taken most of our programming online, which has allowed us to expand with artists from different walks of life and different regions. So wherever you are, thank you so much for joining us. We have our director, Malachi Robinson. There he is, giving the peace sign. And me and him are actually both filmmakers, and we've always wanted to expand and just really explore the local film community here. I know for me, I lived in New York for a little bit. I just knew that was not for me, but I knew that we have a burgeoning film community here. So this is the second installment of our indie virtual film screening series. And today we have Antonio Hernandes of Electric Llama and the star of the show this evening, Miss Trish Adora. How are y'all doing today?
Good, how y'all doing?
Doing okay.
Good. Doing well. How are y'all?
Managing. That's my honest answer. I'm just managing, So I'll start with Antonio. The question I've always wanted to ask you, and I was going to wait until the end, but I figured I'd ask it now. What is Electric Llama? What is the name, and describe the organization or your brand?
Yeah, so Electric Llama is just an alias I came up with. I just needed something, just kind of have like my online name or whatever. So it really wasn't an aim to really have a brand. It was just something I chose just for like my social media handles. And my family's from Peru, and so llama is an animal that's found like in that region in South America. And actually on the flag of Peru, there's a vicuña, which is like an animal that's kind of related to the llama that's on the crest of the Peruvian flag. And the vicuña is actually how I got my DJ name. So that's why my DJ name is Vicuña. That's the animal on the Peruvian flag on the crest. So I kind of just want something that kind of related to my background. And I use electric to refer to digital media. So photography, videography, and all that.
Sweet. And Electric Llama Media covers, can you just describe what that is?
Yeah, so it was really my blog and kind of just what I went by on social media. And so now I've gone to Catch Lightning kind of as my work since about like last year, so about maybe the past year and a half. Catch Lightning, and that refers to in the middle of the llama of my logo, there's an arrow and a lightning bolt referring to capturing moments and everything like that. But yeah, I just kept Electric Llama, and that's just kind of like my alias, and like kind of just having a different name to use, Like I'm a big wrestling fan, so wrestlers have their, they have their their real name, but then they also have like their stage name, their ring name. So this is kind of like my version of having a ring name.
Hey, I like that concept. Yes, Electric Llama. Like I said earlier, it's definitely a catchy name. Like the first time I saw that, I think it was back in 2015. I think you were doing you were premiering your Garnish series at in Tacoma Park. That also has a strange name. Oh, I can't remember right now. But yeah, so your family is from Peru.
Yeah.
But you grew up in DC, you grew up in Maryland?
Yeah, born and raised. We grew up in Northwest, then moved out to PG, Prince George's County, to Greenbelt. That's where I started middle school.
Sweet. So how has living here, growing up here, how do you think that's influenced your work and your aesthetic?
I mean, probably influenced almost everything, because we have so much culture from music to people. It's very diverse. We have our own indigenous music from go-go music here in DC, but also nearby in Baltimore, they have Baltimore club music, which I think is probably the most influential music of like maybe the past couple decades. You see it now with WAP, with the Cardi B and Megan song, right there, that's made from a Baltimore club classic, and now that's #1 on the charts.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Go-Go has been in everywhere from like Jill Scott to Beyonce to Amerie. Chuck Brown's toured with the greats, and Chuck Brown himself also played with like a Cuban band. So Go-Go also has Latin roots, which I think is really interesting. So this area is a melting pot. So I think that's really influenced like how I see my work and how I see myself amongst everything. So I just hope that the stuff I do or the stuff I cover or the stuff I share can just really add to what other people are already doing.
Beautiful. And Trish, I want to ask questions, but I don't want to ask too much because I know we're going to get into your story. But so you were born in DC, raised in DC?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Southeast Washington, DC. So
that's where I'm recording live from now.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. And this is a weird question to ask because we're going from film into wrestling, but how has your upbringing here? How has that kind of made a mark on your career as a wrestler?
I grew up in Southeast DC. I have 5 brothers. I joined the Army as well. So all throughout my life, I've just always been one of the boys. So just seeing wrestling at an early age and just seeing women wrestle men at an early age definitely left a big imprint on me as a child growing up. I mean, without seeing some of that stuff, I mean, who knows where I could have been, but seeing that left a mark on me, and I decided to pursue my career in wrestling.
Sweet. And a question, I guess, for both of you, who is your favorite wrestler? Is that a weird question to ask? You have a favorite wrestler?
No, that's not a weird question at all. Some of my favorite wrestlers, Randy Savage from the 80s, and just those larger than life characters, Ultimate Warrior, definitely. I'm a very big fan of the women wrestlers, Chyna, Jacqueline, Lita, Trish Stratus, definitely trailblazers.
Sweet. What about you, Antonio?
I was really big into ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling, especially in middle school. You got guys like Rob Van Dam, Sabu, and Raven, and you just had really just crazy monikers, Taz. You had combinations of people, talents, and skills that sometimes made sense, but sometimes didn't make sense. Like there was a tag team with a dude who was Amish, and he had a partner named Dastardly Danny Doring. And it doesn't really make any sense to have he was like a really big Amish guy with like this guy who was kind of like trying to be like a pretty boy kind of thing, but then the Amish guy would like fly around a lot, and I thought it was just cool that sometimes it's cool just to see something cool and just for no reason other than the fact that it looks kind of weird. But then you had people, you had Rey Mysterio, who also was in ECW for a little bit, and he's a legend for just flying around and being an influence on wrestling, but also being an influence to people because Rey Mysterio is like 5'6" at most or something like that. 5'6", 180. I might be taller than Rey Mysterio, and he's like one of the best wrestlers ever. So there's a lot of just different things in ECW that I really liked.
Sweet.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead.
Yeah. I want to know how you guys met. Like how did that come about? Maybe we can even revisit that later. But how did this come together?
Yeah, so basically I saw a flyer for the show that was at the end of the film at a coffee shop in Petworth. So I went to Qualia the morning. It was the morning of the show, which was on February 15th. And I had been to the shop maybe a couple days before, and I hadn't really noticed anything. And I was just waiting for my coffee, and I just noticed this flyer. And I think Trish was on it, and I think other people were on it. I can't remember who was on the flyer. But then I was like, they were saying that there was this championship, this Pan-African championship, and there was this promotion called Fight Club, and all this was happening tonight. And I was like, this is crazy. So pre-pandemic, on Saturday nights, I was taking photos at a club every Saturday night. And so I would have to go into work at about 11:30. And I think the show was starting around 7 or something like that. So I was like, well, I have some time to go see the show. So I looked it up. I like DM Trish, was like, hey, I just saw this flyer. I think something was missing from the flyer, like they didn't have the time or the something like that. Like the time and location was missing. And I was like, I'm trying to get info on the show. So I Googled it and I think I pulled up the Eventbrite. So I just got some tickets. And I just went because I was like, I have some time before work later on. And I just took my camera, got a bunch of photos. But then when I went to the show, the energy there at the show was crazy. Like all the matches were good. And then when I saw Trish, when I saw her performances, because I think Trish wrestled, did you wrestle 3 times that night?
Yes, 3 times.
Yeah, so it was a tournament. So I saw Trish wrestle 3 times that night. And I was just like, wow, like this is amazing. Like the energy from the crowd was good. I was like, Trish's performance was just off the charts and just everything from the entrance to how she got the crowd behind her. And I was just like, this was like, had I known, I would have like decided to do like video and stuff there, but it worked out since I got footage from other people that were there. And then I went up to her and I was like, hey, because at the end of the show, they had literally 10 minutes to get out of the building. So she was taking pictures with people and she was with her family and stuff. And I was like, hey, I'm Antonio. I'm not like a random, like crazy guy. I'm like an aspiring filmmaker or whatever, documentarian. And I want to do a piece about you, about you and your work. And I'm going to DM you next week. And we worked out a time to meet up, and then we met up at a Boyz, like near you, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And then we just talked about it. And then we did an interview, and then that Saturday, a couple weeks later, and then that Saturday, a couple days after the interview, she defended her title, and that was the last thing we filmed. So we only got to film twice before the pandemic hit and just shut down everything.
Nice. Yeah, wow. When I first saw this, it's just really so refreshing to see. I never really grew up with wrestling. I think that I kind of got into wrestling when I was living in Virginia, because Virginia actually, the Tidewater area, like 757, they have a wrestling community there. And people don't know this, but Virginia's actually like really big on actors. They shoot a lot of period pieces. So it's a lot of actors that were like starring in movies that took place in the 1860s. They were also wrestlers. And I just want to know what about Florida, because we mentioned you went from DC to Florida because of the wrestling community. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the wrestling community in Florida is nice deep roots. So when I was looking for a place to sort of start over in a sense, I decided to go with Florida. It was really the one place that like stood out. It was either going to be Florida or like somewhere in the Midwest, but I'm glad I chose Florida. So.
Yeah. And so when you came back wrestling here in the DC area, how can you compare the two?
That is pretty interesting. So Florida has sort of a tight-knit community. So usually if you go like in either direction, 6 hours, you're still in Florida. So the Florida wrestling community is like pretty small. I would say that up north, I don't know, the scene's a little bit bigger, going up to New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. You can even include like areas in the Midwest and stuff like that, Ohio and things like that. So I would say the difference is pretty vast. The audience seems to be a little different as well. So,
yeah. And you being a Black female wrestler, I hate to ask like the challenges. I just know it's kind of obvious, in any industry that's male dominated. But can you just speak about maybe even the perception when you entered spaces, like what that could have been like for you?
Well, so all my life, I've kind of always been in male dominated spaces. Mm-hmm. So I usually feel about at home. I never once felt like I didn't belong or that there was something I wasn't supposed to be doing or anything like that. which I'm thankful for. I'm very thankful for that. And it was kind of threaded throughout my training as well. My trainers are Barbour and Dudley, Team 3D. So they really lead with sort of a iron fist. So, yeah, so it's kind of
sweet. What has been one of
the one thing? The live stream of the premiere just ended a few moments ago, so we did have a few people that just joined us just now from the premiere. So welcome everyone for joining the film screening live Q&A post the film. Hope you enjoyed it. So we're just having some brief discussion about the film, at least what we've seen so far, featuring Trish and directed by Antonio. So Britt is actually leading the question, so I'm just going to hand it back to her to, just continue our conversation.
Sweet. Yeah, again, thank you everybody for sticking around for the Q&A. We have Trish here, so I feel like even though this was shot long ago, I feel like I just watched you win all over again. So yeah, it's just such an amazing feat. I think the last question we talked about your experience and being a woman in a predominantly male industry. And it's just, having a good support system around you, I think is important. Would you have any advice for other female wrestlers entering that are interested in coming into this world?
My main advice would be to save your money, honestly. Like a lot of this is, you put up a lot up front. So it's just important to consider that coming in. Just not saving money or not being, aware of how you're spending or how things are going financially. Wrestling is such a tough game financially and mentally as well. So if you keep those two in check, you should have relatively smooth sailing.
Yeah. Aside from what we saw in this doc, what is one of the most memorable moments in your wrestling career so far that maybe wasn't featured here?
Let's see. I have wrestled in Japan and the UK last year. Those were really important milestones for me. Just more confidence. Wrestling for me has been just sort of an uptick in confidence. So as I do more and as I learn more and grow more, I become, more secure in who I am. Things get a little easier. I become a lot more confident. So being able to leave my home country and prove in another world, like those are totally different worlds wrestling wise in the UK and Japan respectively. So being able to go there and show and prove, just huge for me. It did wonders for my confidence. So.
Good, I bet. Wow. I had the question in my mind. Southside Suplex is kind of a question for Antonio with the title. Can you explain that and why you decided to go with that title?
Just because Trish is from Southeast.
Mm-hmm.
And then the suplex is just like a basic wrestling move. So I wanted to just think of something like just really like just kind of like simple and kind of just catchy, because this is kind of like part of a series called Indelible, but this doesn't really exist in the same universe as all the other episodes. So this is kind of like a special kind of project or whatever. So I wanted to give it a title as well, because initially I had intended to kind of make this like something longer, maybe, I don't know, 40 or 45, maybe not quite a feature, like an hour long or something like that. But the intention was to like kind of go through things like training. So we were trying to like plan back and forth of maybe getting footage of her training at Ring of Honor and kind of just training in general, and do more interviews with like family and trying to get more background and stuff like that. So when I decided to go ahead and make the short, I decided to just title it differently than I did the other ones. Kind of keep it the same aesthetic with the black and white, the yellow accents, and kind of keep some things the same, but also kind of differentiate it, and that doesn't kind of exist in the same universe.
Yeah, and that's also, I noticed your work. So you pretty much are the producer, editor, director, camera one, camera two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about that process. It's like a full-on like filmmaker, not even just like one specific title, but wearing all those hats.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just learned as I went along. I got into it when I was in college. So maybe my last year, second to last year at Towson, I just started doing projects because I got into photography at first. And then I started getting into like kind of documenting stuff when I took a visual anthropology class at Towson.
How sweet.
So they didn't really teach us anything technical. We kind of just had to figure out everything with what we had. Everyone in that class had something different. So I just kind of just learning as I go along. I think you mentioned garnish early on, so that was just another thing that I was doing to kind of teach myself how to edit, teach myself how to do interviews, teach myself how to like set up a shot. So kind of just learning throughout the years. And pretty much with this one, it's kind of different. Because when you're shooting things live, you're shooting a match, you know, if it's just me, then I have to be really careful about where I am. Like for instance, when I'm ringside and getting the match, I have to be aware of where the cameras where the cameras were in the venue were. So like what I had to do is say, hey, where can I stand? Where should I stand so I wouldn't be in the way of anyone? At the same time, I have to be aware of other videographers and camera people who are also filming or taking photographs or whatever. And yeah, I mean, like the process, like you mentioned, when I'm getting into post, I'm doing the editing, you know, I transcribe it. I know there are programs that you can get to transcribe for you, but I like transcribing it myself. I know it's slow, but it helps me kind of like get familiar with what I have to work with as far as the interview. And yeah, I just try to keep the editing kind of like really simple, but try to just keep it as tight as possible, and kind of treat it like a poem where I cut it down to kind of like what is really necessary, what is really meaningful. And yeah, just, you know, kind of just teaching myself, trial and error.
Sweet. I feel like filmmakers, it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of organization, a lot of, you know, structure. And that's something that Trish, you mentioned in the documentary is your Army background and kind of how those tenets played into your wrestling career. Can you speak a little bit about that, about your experience with the Army and translating that into your wrestling career?
Yeah, so being disciplined and being in the Army were like hand in hand. It's like you can't go far without being disciplined. They kind of beat it in your head. So you start to become a morning person. You start to make your bed every morning. You start to, you know, have your shoulders back. You start to have a little more confidence about yourself. You start to even care how you're dressed. You're carrying like the things are buttoned. You're carrying the things are neat and things like that. So it's really just about having personal pride is something that was just sort of instilled in me through way of, you know, lots of different ways. So just having personal pride and confidence and things like that.
Nice. Do you have a moment you can pinpoint where you saw something and you decided that's what I want to do? That's the career I want to take. Can you pinpoint like a specific moment in time when that happened?
I can, yeah. There's this intergender match between Jacqueline and Crash Holly, and it was one of the first times I'd ever seen, you know, a woman and man wrestle, and it was a Black woman, and I thought that was so interesting, just seeing the dynamic and how they played off of each other, and just the storytelling and how it all made sense to me as a kid. You know, I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. You know, she ended up beating him. So I was just over the moon about that. I thought it was the coolest thing. And I knew right then and there, I was like, I can totally be a wrestler. That's definitely what I want to do.
Cool. Are there any myths about wrestling that you want to dispel or like maybe set the record straight about?
I approached that question very timidly. I don't really know any offhand that are very, very far off base.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe something will come up. I'll think about that one.
It's all good. I asked because I started watching, though that's my other experience with wrestling. Aside from meeting the wrestlers in the Tidewater area, I started watching the show on Vice, the Dark Side of the Ring. And that also kind of got me into like, and I understand that they're talking about the dark side. I'm pretty sure there's many other sides of the ring. But yeah, Malachi, did you have any questions? Any other questions?
Yes. Well, actually, Antonio kind of answered the question I was going to ask in terms of being a filmmaker with maybe not as much experience as the person next to you who may have went to film school for however many years. And we kind of spoke to that discipline of just learning as you go and just wanting to learn more. So I guess just for those that are out there that are watching who want to get into filmmaking but don't know how, or just don't know what the first step would be in terms of, because what you're doing the editing, you're doing the filming, you're doing the producing. And like Britt said, that's discipline. So I guess the question would be just what outside of just having that willingness to learn, what outside of that would you need to produce a film?
That's a really good question. I think for me, like say if I wanted to get started with like a project or a series, I just focus on something like really simple. Like I like to keep things really simple. Like for instance with Indelible, I wanted to, the Indelible series really focuses on musicians. So I know when I started that series, I was like, I'm gonna start on musicians here in the area. I knew I was gonna choose to do it in black and white, and I was gonna choose to do it in yellow. I had a previous project called Garnish where I kind of focused on musicians also, but other type of creatives. And I knew I wanted to do short videos. I knew I wanted to do cover live events. So what makes things kind of easier is that if you simplify everything, it will be very hard for me when I've started out to say, I'm gonna do an hour-long documentary on go-go. Like if I set out before I really knew what I was doing, it probably would never have gotten done. So I started saying, okay, I want to do something that's like 2 minutes. So when I did my previous series called Garnish, the videos were like 2-3 minutes long. I started on people that I knew. I was interviewing friends of mine. I had, interviewing like other people I knew who were doing creative stuff. So I just kept things like really simple and really kind of close to home and close to me, like both like literally and figuratively. And so that way you don't have to feel like you're extending yourself, or you don't have to feel like you have to shut yourself so far, because as a filmmaker, there's so many things can happen that can prevent a film from getting done. So one of the things that's most important is like actually just getting the film done, just getting something. So it's kind of like starting small and completing things. Once you build a foundation, the other stuff comes in later, because you can always, there's going to a new camera comes out every year or two. The software is always constantly evolving. You can learn things like After Effects and graphics and all kinds of stuff as you go along. It takes time to develop skills to do interviews and editing, all the kind of stuff that you need to do. And yeah, start small and link with other people that are of similar mind and similar passion.
That's really good. I think the message from that is simplicity is key. Hopefully someone takes that message and, puts it in, not even just filmmaking, but just in life in general, instead of thinking on the bigger scale, because not everyone has access to a red camera, or not everyone has access to a full production team. But like you said, you can start small, start simple, and then grow from there.
And it's not hard. Like I think sometimes people think like editing or something is hard. Like it's not that hard. And I think that might be a barrier. It's like, oh, this is difficult, or like doing graphics or something. So if you think it's going to be really difficult, that's going to be a barrier. But if you feel like there's an accessibility that that you can do it, it might kind of like ease you into it. You won't have kind of like that mental creative block that will kind of prevent you from starting something or completing something.
Cool. I have another question for Trish. Who did you look up to growing up? I mean, were you in, I guess, whenever you first got exposed to wrestling as a child or whatever that was, who did you look up to? Like, what inspired you? Or, because I will say there was little representation of Black female wrestlers back then, but outside of that, like, who did you look up to?
I really thought that all the women wrestlers were amazing. I thought even Alundra Blaze, China, Lita, Sherry Martel, everybody from the 80s coming on down. Let's see, Jacqueline, Jazz. A lot of the female competitors, I thought they were really cutting edge. They were all so different. They all brought something super unique, and they were very inspiring to watch. Like, I really got into them all. I believed them all. And, you know, just growing up in a household with all boys, it was just nice to just see women just doing what they needed to do. So.
Cool.
What's next what do you have coming up? What's next? I know that kind of determining anything right now because of the Coco David, what somebody that whole situation. It's kind of hard to determine anything right now, but do you have any, maybe even aspirations of what you would like to see happen with your career?
Well, as of right now, I'm trying to see if there's a safe way to conduct shows. So just trying to see which companies are just doing things on the more safe side. I did just have a title defense at Fight Club this past weekend out in Baltimore. So that was pretty fun. As of anything else coming up, I don't have anything right now. We're still trying to figure a few things out, trying to see who's being the safest, whether it's fair to wait or just weighing out all my options right now.
Sweet. And what about you, Antonio? Screenings, shooting anything?
Well, the next screening is coming up actually. So this project, so the original version of this project got selected for the Black Film Supremacy Film Festival in Baltimore.
Oh, sweet, you're back.
Yeah, so last year, an entry in the Indelible series was entered, and that starred Abdul Ali, an artist, performer, poet out of Baltimore. And so that actually won like the Viewer's Choice for short doc last year. I decided to enter that again this year. So I entered the project with Trish, and so that I got accepted. So that's cool, and that's going to be in September.
Sweet.
Early September, first weekend of September. So I'll announce that soon myself. But they always have like dope filmmakers from like all over the world, literally. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I have some other material for episodes from Indelible that I want to put out. So I have a couple more episodes that I can still work on and put out. And then I'm working on a short documentary about a youth theater group called Paso Nuevo that's based out of Gala Theater in DC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I shot that maybe 2 years ago, and it's kind of like a more involved project, so it's been kind of harder to work on and give it like the time that it needs. So I'll be going back to working on that. So I'm hoping to have that done before the end of the year.
Sweet, everything. Yeah. Any I mean, how are we all feeling right now? I mean, I know I don't want to. Of course, this is focused on art, but I did want to just ask how we're feeling right now about just everything going on in the world. It's another little wellness check before we close out. How are we all feeling?
Oof. I find myself feeling a little overwhelmed for the most part, but I feel like so long as I keep a plan in place and just kind of be intentional every day, you know, about getting stuff done or not getting too caught up with not having a set schedule and with just the world being thrown off its axis a little bit. So I think just trying to stay organized and keeping myself afloat.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I've been going into work the latter half of the week for the past couple months now. So that's been cool. So I have like some semblance of normalcy in a way. I think like Trish, everything's kind of overwhelming just from everything happening, from Black people being targeted and killed again, you have companies and everything that's stumbling, trying to be diverse. News is overwhelming. So I've been trying to just spend my time outside a lot. I got really into hiking recently, the past couple months, and that's like the best thing. So hiking, trail running. So that's been kind of my way to kind of just keep myself centered, and just be able to process everything that's happening around me.
How about you, Malachi?
Literally everything everyone has said so far. Just trying to find things to keep myself busy, creatively, mentally, spiritually, everything. Just trying to, adjust as, the days go on, because I mean, everyone's in the same position where this thing has lasted longer than anyone's expected. So it's just a matter of adjusting and kind of just restructuring life, planning for the future, and just trying to stay positive, even though it's hard to, but it's just take it one day at a time.
Yeah, that's my thing now, is one day at a time. I really try to make, every day I try to find one thing I'm thankful for, or just one. I mean, obviously there's might be more than one things, but I have to really just count my blessings every day, because it just goes up and down. All of our emotions are up and down. I think having this global pandemic, and then this all the racial issues happening, is really hard for people of color to just be. So I'm really just, like you said, taking it one day at a time. And the weather's changing. We're still here. So just kind of, I hate to say get used to it, but just accepting things. I think that a lot of the problem is where you're trying to fight, which isn't good to do, and when we're dealing with a disease, you know what I mean? But for those out there that's watching, thank you so much for sticking around. And does anyone have any final words they want to say before we close out?
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for supporting. PG filmmaker, a DC creative artist, and it's wrestling to me is an art. I think it's like one of the most pure forms of art. So I'm glad I really got to do this project, and I'm glad Trish responded to my crazy DM and my crazy like, hey, I meant like, after the show, and like was like, hey, I'm not a crazy guy. I'm not going to say I'm not a crazy guy, but hey, I had this idea, and I'm glad I was able to make something and put something out with what I had, what we got footage of.
Thank you. Honestly, I really appreciate being a part of this project. I appreciate you reaching out, and even just the crazy way we met. It's just the universe doing its thing again, and we got to just let it happen. And I'm happy it's happening. And I'm really honored to be a part of this. Really, it's helping me bridge the gap too between wrestling and the outside world as well. So really, thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for being here. It's another great event. I'm glad that we were able to tell this story, because it's really important for us to see representation in multiple industries across the world. So thank you guys so much for agreeing to take part of this, and we'll see you all. Check out Creative Suitland. Okay, before we close, I did want to say one thing. So we've been talking a lot about filmmaking, and for those of you that are watching that want to learn more about becoming a filmmaker, we are starting a course called Let's Make a Movie. We have our first introductory workshop on September 3rd. So visit creativesuitland.org to find out more information. Malachi, did you want to say anything else about that?
No, that's it. I mean, it's a pleasure to share the space with y'all virtually. Just connect with fellow creators, fellow artists, and everything in between. So we're looking forward to seeing amazing things from y'all in the future and supporting you all in however way we can. So thank you all for joining us live, whoever watched via YouTube or via our website, and for those that watched the playback on YouTube. It was a pleasure. This was great. So thank you all once again.
Thank y'all. Good luck and good night.